So welcome, Kate. Today's session is all about the menopause. And in having a chat with Kate in preparation for this meeting, we started talking about why I know absolutely nothing about it. We kind of came to the conclusion that it all started back at childhood and school. My sex education, I went to a school that actually became mixed whilst I was there, but they used to separate us for sex education. So I learned nothing about periods, and I learned nothing about the female human body apart from the fact that you produce eggs. A little later on, when I started college, I got a job at the local Sainsbury's, and I can always remember in horror seeing this pack of Tampax coming towards me on the conveyor belt, surrounded by baked beans and cornflakes and everything else, and thinking, well, oh, there we are, that's gone, got rid of that embarrassment. A few years later, with a first girlfriend whose period started, and she said, "Can you go to the chemist and buy me some Tampax?" And, do you mean I've got to go into the chemist and actually ask for these strange things? And it was horrible. Then my mum started going through the menopause, and don't worry, it's your mum. She's all right. She's just, I'm just going through the menopause, and that's all I ever learned. Then recently at work, when we were all in the office, what I learned was before the menopause, you like the room hot and warm, and as soon as you start going through the menopause, you want all the bloody windows open. So anyway, that's my knowledge. So I'm here, like us all, probably to find out more and find out the positives and the negatives, because there are huge positives to the menopause as well, that Kate's going to touch on. Now, having done my bit, I should introduce Kate. So Kate is an award-winning author. Her book, which is just behind us. Kate, reach and show us your book.
There you go.
Your second phase. Katie, it's available to buy, and Katie will put a link in the chat to where you can buy it. But Kate is an expert on these things, and has written books, talks, and is going to share with us today some of her thoughts. So Kate, welcome.
Wow, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you very, very much for inviting me to be with you today. It's a real pleasure. Mark, your experience is so similar to virtually everybody I speak to, whether they're male or female, because even when we were split up to go in our separate sex education classes, menopause was never mentioned. And realistically, it was, unless you had a very sort of open household, for most people, menopause was not discussed at all. And much of that is because we're really only the third generation of women to experience our menopause en masse. So if you were born in 1900, you were the first generation of women who would live past your menopause. So our grandmothers were that generation, and then our mothers, and realistically, they were not taught to talk about it, and therefore they passed that on to us. And very little was known, to be fair, about menopause, and now we know much more. So the average age of menopause in this country, North America and Europe is 51. But the average age that you'll experience symptoms is somewhere between the age of 45 and 55. So our perception of menopause is of an older woman's experience, but it's not. At 45, we certainly don't feel old. We don't feel like the depiction of a menopausal woman. So what we see and what we hear about, so every older woman joke that you've ever heard, and let's face it, they were rife in the 70s, 80s, and possibly 90s. Our perception of ourselves when we reach menopause is not in alignment with the imaging that we're given and the information that we're given, and it's incorrect essentially. So at 45, you can on average start to experience your symptoms, and they can last for, on average, we're dealing in averages here, somewhere between 4 to 8 years according to the NHS. But I regularly speak to women who are in excess of a decade, so 11, 12, 13 years. And I have a list, and it's in the book, of 40 symptoms. Now, most of us can probably name 5. And I was with you. I mean, I know all of this now, but when I started my menopause 7 years ago, I didn't know anything either. I thought maybe I'll have a hot flush, maybe my periods will be a bit unpredictable, maybe I'll have some mood swings, but pretty much that was it. But that's not it. And it can be a completely life-changing experience. And I collected 27 of those symptoms. But let's put that into some perspective. So if there were 4 of us sat around a table drinking tea, one of us would sail through without any problems whatsoever. Lucky lady. Then there's 2 of us who would go through with some issues, but with a little bit of assistance, maybe some lifestyle changes, we'll get through without too much trouble. And then the last one, and I was one of those, it's going to be a life-changing experience. It's going to be devastating. And because of this level of variability, so you can have one symptom which is utterly awful, or you can have 5 or 6 or even 10 and they're just downright annoying. Because of that level of variability, we find it very difficult to create a standard approach or a standard understanding, and as human beings we like patterns. So we as individuals feel like, well, it's too difficult to understand and therefore we'll just kind of put it to one side. But that's where the mistake occurs, because I can guarantee that all of us, and I know I will have, I can even think of a few, will have known a woman who was having an extremely hard time during their menopause and not understood what was going on. And because of the nature of symptoms, they don't take a day off. They don't have a night off. You can't leave your symptoms in the creche, and then go through the security barrier. That doesn't work. They come with you to every single important event, meeting, presentation. They're alongside. And it's highly attritional for some women.
Okay, what you mentioned a number of symptoms there. What are the main ones? And actually, what is going on biologically? What's causing this?
Okay, so what's happening is you're running out of eggs in your ovaries, and so because of that, you start the production of estrogen and progesterone starts to lessen. And also your testosterone can start to lessen as well. And we have testosterone as well. It's just not in as great a quantity as men. As our hormones start to lessen, in exercise books there's this lovely long curve as they kind of drift away, but actually it feels like a scrambled up bit of wool is how it feels. So your hormones are doing this, they're oscillating all over the place, and it feels like you're being put through the mill. And your body is this really finely tuned process, a machine really, and it will try and jump in and help out and produce hormones from elsewhere. But as you go through this process, your hormones are returning to a point that they were at pre-pubescent, basically. So when you were a girl, that's the level that you kind of return to. And there is power in that. We can talk about that in a minute. But as far as the hormones are concerned, so as far as the symptoms are concerned, so some of the big ones are obviously the superstar of all symptoms is hot flushes and night sweats. They don't always go together, but they very frequently do. I think it's now 79% of women experience hot flushes of those who do have symptoms, but it's not ubiquitous. So if you don't have them, it doesn't mean you're not menopausal. And sadly, historically, they've been used as a way of deciding whether you are menopausal or not. Also, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, they're very, very common and need to be taken very, very seriously because the highest rate of suicide for women is at between the age of 45 and 49. It was 50 and 54, but that is prime menopausal age, and that is due to your estrogen. We also have things like fatigue, aches and pains, joint pains, gum problems, teeth problems. They're very common as well. There's insomnia, that's a big issue for many women. There are, gosh, it goes on.
Good. So that sounds a real challenge. It's a, you know, what are the what are the, first of all, talk about, you know, what are the coping mechanisms? What are the things that, you know, the women should be doing during that period? What are the positives, and how can people around help? Three big questions there. Let's take them one at a time.
Okay, so coping mechanisms. So actually what your menopause is doing is it's a transition from the first to the second phase of your womanhood. Okay, and as it is a transition, so an end and a beginning, you get to define a huge amount of what happens next. But this process, this menopausal process, is about you getting everything in order. It's your body is saying, come on, in order for you to do everything you want to do in this next phase, we're going to have to be looking after ourselves. We're going to have to sort things out. So it's asking you to sort out the way you live, the way you eat and drink, the way, you know, you look after yourself, all of these things. This is the time to get your house in order. And that is part of your coping mechanism. It is about looking at your diet, making sure that you eat a rainbow of colours, you drink lots of water, you cut out a lot of the stimulants. So everything that we kind of assume is nice, really. So coffee, tea, so caffeine is incredibly detrimental to sleep, and it also brings on hot flushes. So if you start to strip that out, start to actually think about the amount of caffeine that you're consuming. Even green tea has caffeine, and we don't think about that. Also, water, lots of water, because you need to flush out all the old hormones of being reprocessed around your body, and that's really damaging. So you want to get those out. So exercise, it's time to look at how you exercise and what you do. If you've allowed yourself just to let things go, especially over this period of COVID, now is the time to say, do you know what, I'm really worth this effort. I'm really worth the half an hour a day it takes for me to go for a power walk, or it takes for me to do skipping in the garden. I can't do skipping anymore. Everybody, by the way, post children, that is an exercise I can't do. But, you know, if it's something that you can do and it's easy to do and it costs virtually nothing, a skipping rope is like buttons, hula hoops, all of those sorts of things. You know, whatever it is, dancing, it's about getting your heart rate up and enjoying it. So it is about giving yourself the time to look after yourself, because one of the other things that's going on during your menopause is, because your ovaries aren't producing the estrogen anymore, your body is looking for it elsewhere. So fat is very good at producing estrogen, and the fat around your middle is super good at producing estrogen. So you start to put fat on around your middle. In fact, your body is doing it on purpose. So what you eat, it is actually drawing its resources into that place so that you are putting fat on around your middle. But that fat is actually really bad for you. So you're working against that biology, if you like. So you have to, it's consistent, it's about valuing what it's doing for you and actually focusing on it. And also, if you can sleep, definitely get some sleep. And there's some great things you can do to help yourself with that. So, what's the next thing?
I'm still getting over the first thing. So there's coping. How can people around help? We go back to that the facetious comment about opening and closing the window. What else can people do around to understand, help, and support?
Okay, so sorry, I've just realised the other thing is alcohol. Take that out, and if you smoke, that has to go most definitely. So yes, lessen the alcohol. There's a few reasons for that. It doesn't help with sleep, and secondly, it stops in your absorption of vitamin D, and therefore isn't good for your bones. And osteoporosis is a big issue. So it's something that we really do need to think about. Limit it. I'm not saying cut it out, just limit it. So what can people around you do to help? First of all, first and foremost, it's about awareness. It's about understanding exactly what this is. So that the taboo has hooks in you around about not talking about it, not speaking about it, not conversing about it. So once that's broken down, so once you start saying, this is my menopause, and the people around you go, oh God, I better go and have a look and see what that is. Once you create a level of base awareness around the menopause, then the taboo starts to break down, and it stops being so powerful, and therefore you can step in to offer support. Now, women do have different temperature requirements when they are in menopause. Some women get cold flushes, and they literally wearing opaque tights in the middle of a heat wave. And other women, and I was one of them, have hot flushes, and you need a steady, constant cooler temperature. So women need an office about 10 degrees warmer generally than men, and most offices are designed to the male requirement. So when you get into menopause, actually you're quite grateful that you're in a cooler office, and at times you actually need an office that's colder still. So if you are in an office with huge glass windows, when we do return there at some point, try and get somewhere that doesn't get that level of solar gain, because that's going to disturb your equilibrium. Also understand that as you go into a stressful situation, it will kick off a hot flush, and actually prepare yourself. And there are things that you can do with that. So CBT is very, very good at managing hot flushes and understanding how to do that. And
Kate, CBT?
Yeah, cognitive behavioural therapy.
Okay.
The talking therapy, and basically all it does is it stretches time, and it looks at what happens and then what you can do. What others can do as well is when women forget things, forgetting is a major symptom. So if anyone has this, it's called brain fog, but it doesn't feel like that when it's happening. It feels like you're going mad, because you start a sentence and then suddenly the whole lot has disappeared. You can't remember what you were going to say. You can't remember. Names are terrible. And it's about offering to step in at that time, offering to fill the space while a woman is trying to get her consciousness back. So I was giving a presentation last night and I forgot Angela Merkel's name. How can you forget Angela Merkel? But at that moment I had to say, and here we've got it in action. I can't remember. And everybody stepped in because this is just part of being human. And also it's about understanding that if a woman is having extremes of emotion, and we do, it's not about you. Rarely it's about you. And equally, at the other end of it, women feel terrible for what's happened and how they respond to things. And it's about saying, okay, we need to sit down and have a talk about this. And how do we manage it? How do we support you? How do we help you?
Thank you. Kate, there's significant upsides as well, and I know we want to talk about that. We're about halfway through now. Just a quick bit. Anyone in the audience out there, questions, thoughts, wants to share anything? Put your hand up. Hang on, I'll just get to a view so I can see everybody. Anyone experiencing this and want to share some thoughts? Nolly, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm very well, thank you. And thank you, Kate, for raising such an important topic. So mine is a bit of a different angle. I'm not going through the menopause, but I come from a culture where it's not discussed at all. And unfortunately, my mum's at an age where she's got dementia now. And so these are conversations I'll probably never be able to have with her. So it's just to say that this is extremely important to actually have these conversations, because in some communities, I mean, I have lots of older relatives who are female who've obviously gone through it, but it's just taboo. I've never, ever had this conversation. So to actually have that in a space like this is extremely important. So thank you, Mark, and thank you, Kate, for what you're doing today.
Thank you, Nolly. Thank you.
Nolly, you're welcome. And just a point on that, and when I started mine, I said to my mum, Mum, how was your experience? What was it like for you? And she said, oh, that's so long ago, I don't want to talk about it. And that was it. That's all I got. But to be honest, your mum's experience is not a guide for yours. It might be marginally like that, but each woman's experience is as unique as a fingerprint. And therefore, it's a genetic lottery. You just don't know. So she could have had one experience and yours can be completely opposite.
Yeah, thank you for that.
That's good. To Tanya.
Tatiana,
hello. Sorry, I do apologize.
Hi, Mark.
Tatiana.
No worries. Thank you, Kate. Really interested in all of this and glad we're opening up about the topic. Be good if companies could take this on board as well. I think some of them are starting to, especially the male-dominated ones. But yeah, that was going to be my question. Like, how much does your families, I have an older sister and my mum's still around, fortunately. So I was going to ask that question, but you answered that. But, you know, I feel terrible now not knowing this stuff before. When my mum was 55 and her own mother died, and she was separating from my dad, and I didn't have any kind of understanding, I think, what else she was probably going through with her physical symptoms. So it was probably the most awful time of her life, and I didn't realize that. So yeah, and I don't come from a culture where we don't talk about things. We do, but it just was never mentioned as anything worth mentioning, funnily enough. So yeah,
and sadly I think that's such a common statement. You know, a life event that every woman will experience was not worth mentioning. And I think that as a generation, this is our fight. You know, we've fought for the vote, we've fought for equal pay, which by the way we're still fighting for. But you know, one of our major generational fights is to get our full reproductive life cycle recognised, and for menopause to be something that we talk about, that we help women with, that we support them with, and we ensure that we use it as a springboard to ensure that they achieve all of their ambitions and expectations for the second phase of their womanhood, because it is an opportunity. And I know we'll talk about that in a minute, but I think that that is our fight. We have a ceiling here of, in a patriarchal environment where we are not encouraged to talk about this, and it is incredibly important, and more organisations are doing so because they're recognising that the cost of not talking about it could be astronomical. So Vodafone released some information about 10 days ago. They've got 15% of their workforce are menopausal. Channel 4 recognised that 13% of their workforce are menopausal. The NHS, 77% of their workforce is female, and the average age, and that statistic is at least 2 years old now, was 42. So that's now about 44, and they are charging towards the menopause. And I'm sure, you know, in some of the other sort of core industries, that these numbers are not going to be unusual.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Please.
So I know that men go through something as well, right, in their middle age. I don't know how much you know about that, but yeah, is what they go through similar in the extent? No. Okay.
No. So you might not, and it's quite rare. Whereas every single one of us will have, sorry, except you, Mark and David, every single one of us as women will have a menopause. It's a guaranteed fact.
And regardless of if you've had children or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's part of our biological life, is that we will go through a menopause, and you don't get to choose how, and you don't get to choose when. As I just said to Nolly, it's a genetic lottery.
Thank you. Okay.
So anybody else wants to just comment or ask a question, or shall we?
Oh, sorry, just one question.
Karen.
Sorry.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. I just wondered, I mean, this is probably a broad question, but sort of some of the myths, and one of the ones I've heard is that sort of women who've had hysterectomies, or, you know, you talked about all women will have a menopause. Does that change the, whether you have, or does it just change how you have one? Because I had heard sort of different kind of myths around that.
Oh, yeah, so if you've had a hysterectomy and your ovaries are intact, then it's the same process. If you've had an oophorectomy and a full hysterectomy, then you go into immediate menopause the minute that happens. So the minute your ovaries are taken away, that's a full, complete menopause. So one day you're not menopausal, the next day you are, and it is incredibly powerful. And it can be extremely debilitating for women unless they receive HRT, but not all women can if they've had that because of cancer. So it's very much, and I know there was a question there about medication. It does depend on what the reason for your oophorectomy or your full hysterectomy. But yeah, if you've had a hysterectomy for another reason, whatever that might be, whether it might have been endometriosis or all sorts of reasons, and so you've got your ovaries intact, then taking HRT, you would just take estrogen, and that's actually the lowest risk HRT that you can take. But it's that's pretty much the only medicine, but I would say that that's the influence it has on your menopausal experience.
And just to follow up on that, I'm just thinking that the education around this is so poor. And I've just sort of, you know, kind of, you know, looking at this recently, and I just am so shocked at. And I'm thinking of Friends and the myths that come up from there. in my 50, just turned 50, so I'm kind of right in the middle of it. But I talked to my younger friends, and I really thought this wasn't ever going to happen to me. So, you know, the fact that it is a fact, and talking to my younger friends where some of these myths have come up, and I just think, gosh, there's a lot to do. So thank you for coming today. And I think, you know, the more I look into it, the more it's being talked about. And I think that's very welcome. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you. We should point out, and Kate asked me to, that she's happy to answer questions. However, she's not medically qualified and can't discuss drugs and prescriptions. But Kate, you brought up HRT there, and Xanatol in the chat has asked what medications are available. Are you able to just give a high level overview?
Yeah. So the way that the medical response to this is really, there is only, well, there's two options. Sometimes they GPs prescribe antidepressants, and they have some evidence of limiting hot flushes, and that is more to deal with the depression and the anxiety around menopause. However, estrogen is at fault here. That's often the thing that's driving the change in your moods and your psychological state, and sometimes it's only estrogen that will help. So it's only a problem if you've got the BRCA gene, or you're very prone to, or you've got breast cancer in your family, at which point you will not get HRT at all. And so very much that antidepressants and some other medication, which I wouldn't like to put my hand up and talk about, they are offered to women in that situation. But HRT, if you are in that quarter of women who are having a life-changing experience, it is a wonder drug. And there is nothing else out there that works the same way. It does carry risks, but each woman has to make that decision for themselves. And if you find that you're in that place and you want to take HRT, but your GP is not helping you, or if you are non-standard, so it's not that you've got cancer in the family, it's breast cancer rather, it might be one of all sorts of other things, then you can request to be referred to a menopause clinic at your local hospital. In London, we are very, very lucky because we have a few, and they are amazing, and you will receive gold standard treatment, and I cannot recommend them highly enough. But if you go to the British Menopause Society website, there is Find a Specialist on there. Put in your postcode, it will tell you your local NHS menopause clinic, and if you've got the cash and you're prepared to spend it, then a private specialist.
Okay, thank you. Your book is called The Second Phase. I'm going to say it again, The Second Phase. Available via the link. Listen, so because let's move on to positives. And a section of your book is around the positive impact this has. Tell us about that. Let's cover that. Let's finish off on a really positive note.
Okay, so the story we don't talk about in menopause, and I'm flabbergasted why we don't, but you are about to become more powerful than you have ever been. And that's not a story that I made up, it's a reality. Because if you speak to postmenopausal women, many of them say, I just can't be bothered to deal with people like that anymore. I'm not interested in doing that anymore. I'm only interested in doing this. And the reason for that is, as I've said a few times now, as your estrogen and progesterone subside, so they start to back off, what happens is your estrogen is like your mothering hormone. It's there to ensure, in an evolutionary sense, even if you've never had children, never wanted children, it's there to be the carer, the looker afterer, the one who puts themselves at the back of the queue. It's the one who is the placater, the relationship builder. That's what it's there for. But as it subsides and goes down back to a prepubescent level, what happens is you elbow your way back to the front of the queue and you never leave it. And with all of that, you become far more focused than you have ever been. You become far more driven than you have ever been. This is the point at which you have an incredible opportunity to define the next phase of your womanhood. It's a beginning, it's not just an end. Nature abhors a vacuum. So you are being called to choose what comes next. And that is, who do you want to be? What do you want to be doing? And where do you want to be doing? And who do you want to be doing it with? All of these are big questions and they take time to think about. But the opportunity lies in ensuring that you grasp this. Everything about you is saying, what do you want? Where do you want to go? What is it about you that's pushing you in a certain direction? It's calling you to be the woman that you want to be. Maybe not the woman that you were before, and you may find that you shed many skins through this process until you get to the point where you go, right, that's it. I actually know who I am now. And this is where I'm going. And at the point you've got that kind of, okay, I'm locked in, got it. That's the point that you really start to push on. You really drive forward. So if you've got your eye on the C-suite, or you've got your eye on, being an entrepreneur, or doing something different, or just pushing hard at what you're doing, or creating a role in a certain type of projects, if that's what you want, you'll find that you'll become very, very focused indeed on achieving it. And what will happen is that every single conversation that you have about your menopause is making sure that you sort of put a pin in that destination and it's drawing you towards it. So you're not saying, I'm really in a bad place and I really need some help. You're actually saying, what I want to do is I want to get there, and I'm just asking for the help that I need from you to help me get to that place over there. And at that point, then it stops being you as a weak person. It's about you saying, no, I'm a woman who knows where I'm going. And it gives you the control that you need to drive you forward. Because one of the things in menopause is that women say all the time is, I've lost control. This process is about gaining control. It's about saying, this is what I want, and I'm going to do what I need to do to get there. And just that process itself gives you every piece of control you ever need, because you start to layer on top of it and it draws you into that space. So unlike every other story we hear about menopause, which is it's terrible, it's awful, I didn't know what to do, I lost control, I didn't know the woman I looked at anymore. And believe me, I've been every single one of those stories. But suddenly you go, oh, hang on, there's an opportunity coming here and I'm going to take it. Because if you don't take it and you let that opportunity flow past, then you just get the threads of it. You don't get the absolute depth of it. So it is about just taking the time out for yourself and saying, this is what I want. So if we connect that back to what I said earlier about making sure that your wellness and your well-being is really important, what you're doing is you're setting up your physiology so that you can create that space. This is a very interconnected process. And once you start to actually build that, then you'll start really firing on all cylinders.
Kate, that sounds amazingly powerful, and I've never really heard that side of things. I don't know whether anybody else has, or whether anybody else has experienced that. But if you have, let's share. It's an opportunity to share.
It's interesting. I'm so not surprised, because women go, "Oh, I didn't realise that. I didn't realise that." It's like turning it around 360 or 180 and looking at it from the other side and looking at it in a reverse mirror, and you go, "Oh." So my challenge, because International Women's Day a little while ago, no, 10 days ago, was choose to challenge. So I'm choosing to challenge each one of you to think about what one thing you're going to push harder for, what one thing you're going to have more of than you thought was possible before. Because that's where the magic lies in this. So maybe in these last few minutes that we've got, if you think about what that might be, and maybe that's the conversation that we can have.
Give you a few minutes to think about that. Kate, you're inspirational. How do you, whilst people are thinking about that question, just do you go into firms and repeat this type? So if anybody wanted to invite you to speak at their organisation, they can contact you via Katie, via the website, or via your LinkedIn profile.
Absolutely, and that's what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I love it. I absolutely love it, because it's about taking us as women and those around us from a place of, I really don't want to think about this, it's scary and frightening, to, oh my God, I've got to have it. I want what's on the other side. And that transition is really, really important.
Thanks, Kate. If you wanted Kate to go in and you wanted a man on the panel as well, I'd be more than delighted to, if Kate will have me, of course.
Of course.
To share the stage with you, because I think that it may help. I don't know. But listen, has anybody got thoughts? Kate issued a challenge there. Do you want to share? Where you're going, what your objectives are, I've forgotten how you put it, Kate.
What one thing do you want more of? Yeah. What one thing do you want to play bigger at than you thought possible?
Somebody put their hand up. Somebody share. Lydia, it looks like you're kind of you're almost coming off mute there. What are your thoughts on this,
Tatiana?
I don't mind sharing. Well, yeah, I was going to also ask Kate, because you've been through the whole kind of mosaic of these symptoms and everything, and I'm living my life. I have quite a lot of anxiety. I always have done since my 20s, since I was a child, probably, worrying about everything in the future. So for me, I'm kind of living life now thinking, oh my God, I'm 46. When I hit 50, that's it. Like, I don't know if I can face that. I don't know if I can face my life and all the things I haven't done. So for me, it's almost like I've only got like 3 more years. We don't know how much we have anyway, but, in that sense, if everything is progressing normally. So I just can't imagine that other side now at all. And were you in that situation? Were you ever, just like before you have kids, you can't really imagine what it's like when you have them. So you know, having been through that and understanding women from a completely different perspective. And I didn't really care about their issues before, if I'm really honest, before it hit me personally. So I just can't even imagine what that's like. And when you say this power and sort of taking back control, when you're going through potentially, you know, mood changing and physiology changing symptoms, how I mean, that sounds like the complete opposite to what you need to feel in control. But are you saying, so, you know, 3-4 years you go through this, and then on this other side it all goes away, and then that's where you kind of have this clarity?
No. So what I'm saying is okay, so you can't predict what's going to happen, and you may just sail through without a single thought. So whatever symptoms come along, you have choices. You can choose what happens next, and it's always understanding what your options are. So medical, it's about HRT, realistically, or non-medical, there are lots of things you can do. But the first thing you start to do is start to look at how you look after yourself and what you do for yourself. And at the age of 50, a lot of what you're saying is about our perception of what happens at menopause is we become past it, we're old, and there's nothing left. And the reason for that is that and if you don't go back very far at all, 100 years, women didn't live that long. You know, if you were lucky, you were really lucky to get through your menopause. So proportionally, we were past it because we, you know, literally, we wouldn't survive it. So it's a perception that we are at the end point, that there is no more. But when the symptoms start to roll in, as they did with mine, and they may not with you, the one thing I recognised very well, I went from being an international project manager and a coach of successful businesswomen, and I couldn't get out the front door within 6 months. And I couldn't. And my best friend took me out of my house and took me to her flat, and I cried and cried and cried. And she said, I didn't realise it had got so bad. And she took me to the chemist and filled my basket up with vitamins and minerals. And she's a public health expert. And the one thing that she gave me, which was not stuff in the basket, it was an understanding that whilst I may not be able to control the symptoms, what I could control was what I did next. So when I had a hot flush, what did I do? I didn't run screaming from the room. I just sat there and I sat in it and I allowed it to pass. I knew it would go, and then I would pick up at the other side, or I would say, this is what it is, this is what's happening to me. And there are lots of things for each one of those symptoms that you can do, that you can take control of the situation, because that power is in your hands. You might not control the symptom, you can control what happens next, your response, how you manage it, what you say. All of those things are well within your control. And it's about understanding that these small pieces of these incremental pieces of control give everything back to you. It's not like you just go, I've lost it. You kind of pull it back in small pieces. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh gosh, I've got all of this. So what happens next? And that's when you start to step into the next piece of power.
Okay.
It's when you've got the reins in your hands that you go, right, we're going to drive this somewhere, and I'm going to decide where it's going to go.
Okay, thank you. Karen, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of comment there, having I think sort of fairly recently got the shock of the fact that it does happen to everybody, and it is starting to happen in my life. And some of the things that you've talked about is really useful. But it's the first time that I've really heard it spoken about so positively, and that there is this power. And I think certainly at the age that we get this, and the times we are in our career, that challenge about one more thing you're going to push harder for. It's so easy to think, oh, do I really want to go for that? You know, is it really, have I really got time to get that promotion? And when you look at men, often in their sort of late 40s and 50s and 60s is where they're getting those C-suite opportunities, those board opportunities. And I think one of the things, having sort of had a taste of some of this, is that I can see how distracting and how it makes you doubt that you can really, that you think, oh, is it really worth it? Because you're feeling, you know, if you're feeling down, you're feeling uncertain. There isn't a lot of information. Luckily, there is a lot more information out there now, that some of the symptoms and some of the feelings that you're having because of this, of what's happening to your body, actually starts making you doubt your own ability. And then you start to think, well, I can, you know, do I really push forward? And I think what you've said today is very inspiring, because it is, yeah, you know, we've got another 10 years, maybe 15 years left working. So, you know, it is the time to push through, where I can see it would be so easy to just go, oh, I'm tired, you know, it's not the time, you know, I'm dealing with all this other stuff. So I just wanted to say thank you. And one of the quotes that I've seen recently that I love so much, which made me think of, which is, you're not too old and it's not too late. In fact, the fact that it's the beginning is just really encouraging and inspiring. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome, Karen. And I think therein lies the thing. It's our perception that the menopause defines the beginning of the end, when it doesn't. If you start your symptoms at 45, 46, effectively you've got another 20 years of your career. That's the bottom line. We're going to be currently our pensionable age is 65. And it's probably going to go up to 66 and 68 and 70 by the time we get there. So in that sense, we've got a lot of career to go. And for some women, it's another career all over again. So just saying that's the end is not fair to the hard work that you've put in to get to this point. You've worked seriously hard to get here. Now's the time to push on, because you are in ascendancy, just like men at this age. You know, you're most knowledgeable, most connected, most experienced, and you are pushing towards the actual pinnacle of your career. You're not on the downward slope. And when our pensionable age was maybe 60 or 55, then hey, you could understand it. That would have been the case. But with 20 years left to go, honour the work that you've done to now, and really see this as the opportunity to get the next phase, because that's your pension, that's everything that defines how that piece is going to be. So it's looking at things in the round instead of saying I'm tired and it's hard. Well, when wasn't it hard? It's always been hard. So it's about pushing on and really starting to connect with what you want.
Okay, so just like to pick up on a point that Karen made there. I think a lot of men at the sort of 40, 50-year-olds who have been, and I'm going to use that provider, that, you know, they've been through their ultra ambitious 20s and 30s, get into their 40s and 50s and kind of relax, lose that ambition, you know, start thinking about just being on the hamster wheel or the conveyor belt, and I think that, you know, if you've, you know, as a woman, if you've gone through the menopause and you've got that second, you've almost got a second wind that we probably don't get the opportunity to have as men.
Yeah.
I don't know whether there's any research been done into that, but Karen, you know, it's a thought. it's a thought.
Yeah, and I think that my husband at times has been very jealous of the fact that I've gone, right, okay, let's wipe the slate clean. I'm going to choose what happens next. I'm going to define the next phase. He's like, that's so not fair. Men don't get this. How come it's just a woman thing? Well, you know, hey, that's just the way it goes. So this is what makes us different. So let's make the most of it. And, you know, for some women, you don't want the major job. For some women, you don't want that, but you want to. I know someone who's just become a triathlete. It's whatever you want to do. Sailing. I knew someone that did some coaching with someone who suddenly did some, you know, Atlantic sailing. So it's whatever your ambition is, wherever that drives you, wherever that spark hits you, that's the point at which to focus on. And it's not always your career, because not everybody wants that. But whatever it is, it's now time to focus on it.
Okay, I think that's a great time to wind up and end. We're coming to the end of the hour. You've been brilliant. I've really enjoyed this hour, and I've learnt a lot. I hope everybody else has. A big hand to Kate. Thank you very much, and thank you
everybody.
to everybody for joining.